episode is a little different. If you've been with the Zero Fluff Books podcast from the beginning, you know the drill. Clean, practical bookkeeping education with zero hype and zero fluff. I've stayed firmly in the teaching lane, how to separate business and personal, how to track sales and fees, and how to reconcile without panic. But today, I'm stepping out from behind the lesson plan to tell you what's changing and why, because the story behind the scenes directly shapes where Zero Fluff Books is headed next. When I left the IRS under the Deferred Resignation Program, my original plan was to launch Zero Fluff Books as a true bookkeeping service. Cleanups, categorizing, reconciliations, and monthly P&Ls for small trades, businesses, and online sellers. That was always the vision, pairing no-nonsense education with hands-on help. Then came a curveball. I was invited to consider returning to the IRS. That put me in limbo. If I went back to government service, offering services would get messy fast. So I kept ZFB strictly educational, on purpose, to stay ethical and compliant while I waited for an answer. For weeks, I had one foot in government, one foot in building this business, and I didn't know which way it would land. That's why the last several episodes were education only. Valuable, yes. The whole vision, no. The waiting is over. I will not be returning to the IRS, which means I'm no longer limited to education only. I can finally expand ZFB into what it was designed to be, a place where you can learn, and when you're ready, hand things off, including a brand new lane we're opening today, Audit Support Services. So here's the short version of the pivot. Education stays, bookkeeping services open for cleanup, categorization, reconciliations, and monthly P&Ls. And now, audit support for taxpayers who need clarity, structure, and a calm plan when a notice or exam hits their mailbox. If you're tired of guessing at your numbers, I can help clean them up. If you're staring at a notice and your heart rate just spiked, I can walk you through what it means and what to do next. Let me back up for a minute and give you the real story of my government career, because without that background, this pivot into services and especially into audit support doesn't make much sense. I spent years working for the Internal Revenue Service as a revenue agent. I was in the Small Business Self-Employed division, which basically means I audited small businesses, sole proprietors, and self-employed individuals. Later, I also spent time on what's called a Special Enforcement Program group, a team that handled more complex, higher-risk cases that sometimes overlapped with criminal investigations. On paper, it looked like a solid career path. I had a GS-13 position, which is a respectable grade in the federal system. The work was steady, the paycheck was predictable, and a lot of people would consider it the type of job you don't walk away from. In fact, plenty of people hang on until retirement because of the benefits and security. But here's the thing. What looks stable and respectable on paper doesn't always feel the same in real life. Most days, my job meant sitting across from ordinary people. Business owners, contractors, tradespeople, Etsy sellers, gig workers, people just trying to make a living. And here's what shocked me. More often than not, the issues that triggered the audit weren't intentional fraud or shady behavior. They were paperwork problems. They were bookkeeping gaps, or more common than you believe, they were the result of a taxpayer trusting the wrong preparer. I can't tell you how many times I'd open a case file, look at the tax return, and immediately know, this return doesn't make sense. Maybe the preparer had claimed deductions that weren't allowed, or they left off income that clearly should have been included. Maybe they plugged in numbers that didn't tie to any real records. And the taxpayer, they signed on the dotted line without really understanding what they were signing. And here's the tough reality. Once your name is on that return, it's yours. The IRS doesn't care that you hired someone else to prepare it. The IRS doesn't care that you didn't fully understand it. You're the one responsible for every number on every line. That hit me hard, because in audit after audit, I saw regular people getting crushed, not because they set out to cheat the system, but because they trusted someone who either didn't know what they were doing, or worse, didn't care. And let me be honest, it's heavy sitting across the table from someone in that position. I'd see the panic on their faces. I'd hear the anxiety in their voices. They weren't masterminds of some elaborate scheme. They were moms, dads, tradespeople, side hustlers, people who just wanted to file their taxes and get on with their lives. Sometimes they cried, sometimes they got angry, sometimes they just shut down because the whole process felt overwhelming. And I'd go home at night carrying the weight of all that. Even when I moved into the Special Enforcement Group, where cases were tied to criminal investigations and the taxpayers weren't innocent victims, I couldn't shake what I had seen earlier. Once you've watched dozens of people get blindsided because their books weren't clean or their preparers cut corners, you start to see patterns, and those patterns stay with you. So when the IRS offered what's called the Deferred Resignation Program, a chance to step away, I took it. On the surface, it was for personal and family reasons. But if I'm honest, the bigger reason was that I already knew I didn't want this to be my long-term career. I'd been looking for a way out almost from the very beginning. By the summer of 2021, just a few months after I started, I already felt it. I didn't want to spend the next decade watching more small business owners crumble under the weight of audits they didn't fully understand. I didn't want to stay stuck in a system where the taxpayer is responsible for every detail, but the standards for preparers are practically non existent. So the deferred resignation gave me breathing room. It gave me a chance to figure out what might come next. But then came the curveball. Just as I was pivoting toward building Zero Fluff Books as a service based business, I got an email. Would you be interested in returning to your position as a revenue agent? And I'll be honest, I thought about it. A GS-13 paycheck is nothing to ignore. The benefits are solid. If I went back, I could collect a steady salary while slowly building this business on the side. Practical? Absolutely. Exciting? Not really. But the moment I replied to that email, everything froze. I couldn't move forward with services. I couldn't work directly with clients. I couldn't even fully speak my mind on certain topics without worrying about crossing a line. And that's why, for the past month, you've only heard me focus on education. It wasn't because I lacked ideas. It was because I was in limbo, waiting to see which way the scale would tip. And that limbo stretched on longer than I wanted. It was frustrating. It was draining. It felt like my future was sitting on pause. Finally, after weeks of waiting, the answer came. I will not be returning to the IRS as a revenue agent. And you know what? The relief was immediate. Not because I didn't value my time there. I did. That job gave me discipline, it gave me structure, and it gave me a front row seat to see just how critical clean books really are. But it also confirmed that my real passion wasn't in enforcing rules after the fact. My passion was in helping people before they get into trouble, or walking beside them when the letters show up so they don't feel lost and alone. With that answer, the fog lifted, the hesitation disappeared, and the original vision for Zero Fluff Books was back on the table, this time with more clarity than ever. Education as the foundation, bookkeeping cleanup and monthly services as the practical support, and now audit support services as the bridge between the two. Here's why the story matters for you. When you hear me talk about clean books, reconciliations, and categorization, I'm not just speaking as someone who loves neat spreadsheets. I'm speaking as someone who has seen what happens when the books aren't clean, when the IRS steps in, when the taxpayer panics, and when a simple notice turns into a major crisis. And when I talk about audit support, it's not abstract. I've been on the other side of the table. I know the questions, I know the process, I know how overwhelming it feels when you get that envelope in the mail. That's why this expansion makes sense. It's not about chasing every possible service under the sun. It's not about trying to be everything to everyone. It's about two clear lanes that work together, bookkeeping and audit support. And running through both of those lanes, like a thread that ties everything together, is education. Because if you understand what's happening, if you know what to expect, if you're prepared, then you're not at the mercy of the system. You can step into it with confidence. That's the government story. That's the background that shaped this business. And that's why this new chapter isn't just a pivot, it's a full alignment with what I know people actually need. Someone to teach clearly, clean up confidently, and support calmly when the letters arrive. Let's shift gears and talk about why I've chosen to expand Zero Fluff Books into services now, and specifically why the services I'm offering look the way they do. First and foremost, nothing is changing on the education side. If you're a DIY kind of person, you can keep tuning in every week for straightforward, no-nonsense episodes. You'll still get the guides, the free resources, and the tools to take control of your books on your own. Why? Because I believe education is empowerment. When you understand your numbers, you take back control. You stop being intimidated by bookkeeping. You stop being blindsided by surprises. And you make better decisions for your business. That has always been and will always be the foundation of Zero Fluff Books. But here's what I also know. Knowledge by itself isn't always enough. A lot of you listening right now already know what to do. You've read the guides, you've listened to the episodes, you've downloaded the checklist, but life gets in the way. Transactions pile up, spreadsheets get messy, reconciling falls off the list. Before you know it, you're 3 months behind, then 6 months, then a year. And at that point, education alone can't move the mountain. You can know every rule in the book. But when you're buried in receipts or transactions, it feels impossible to dig your way out. That's where bookkeeping cleanup comes in. Cleanup means taking those transactions, categorizing them properly, reconciling them against your bank statements, and handing you a clean, readable picture of your business. From there, you can either take the wheel yourself, or if you realize you don't want to keep up with it, I can continue handling it monthly. The point is, you don't have to stay stuck in backlog forever. But cleanup is only half of the story. The new lane, the one I'm most excited about, is Audit Support Services. Because here's the truth. When an IRS notice or audit letter shows up in your mailbox, it's terrifying. Your heart rate spikes. Your mind immediately goes to a worst case scenario. And the biggest fear isn't even the numbers, it's the unknown. What does this letter actually mean? What are they asking for? What happens if I answer wrong? Most people's first instinct is to panic and call a CPA, an EA, or even a tax attorney. And those professionals are valuable. There are absolutely times when you need them. But let's be real. Most everyday taxpayers can't afford $300, $400, or $500 an hour to have someone hold their hand through the audit process. And here's the other reality. Most everyday taxpayers don't need that level of representation for a standard exam. If you've received a letter 2205, the one that says the IRS is opening an examination, 9 times out of 10, you can handle it yourself. The key is not to ignore the letter. The key is to understand exactly what the IRS is asking for, gather your records clearly, and respond on time. Unless you knowingly did something shady on your return, you don't need a tax attorney at $400 an hour to tell you what's in plain English on that notice. That's where Zero Fluff Books comes in. I designed Audit Support Services to be the affordable option, a way to walk through the process step by step without draining your bank account or leaving you alone at the table. So let me break down what audit support actually means in practice, because I want you to have a clear picture. First, a notice review. If you've ever opened an IRS letter and thought, I don't even know what this means, that's where I come in. I'll translate that notice into plain English, point out what the IRS is asking for, what kind of documents they want, and the deadlines you need to know. No strategies, no complicated tax talk, just clarity so you're not left guessing. Second, document prep. This is usually where people freeze. The IRS might send what's called an information document request. Basically, show me your receipts and records. And if you've got a year or two of statements and invoices sitting in piles, it can feel overwhelming. What I do is take those records, organize them into an IRS ready package, and make sure it's labeled and clear. That way, when you send it in or walk into a meeting, you actually understand what's being presented. Third, meeting support. For a lot of people, the scariest part isn't the letter. It's sitting in front of an agent and not knowing how to answer their questions. That's where I can sit beside you, either virtually or in person, and be your support. I'm not there as your legal representative, but I am there to help you stay grounded, translate the bookkeeping lingo, and make sure you understand what's being asked before you respond. And finally, bundled help. If you want both, the organized documents and someone in your corner during the meeting, you can combine those pieces so you've got everything aligned. Clean records plus backup when you need it most. Now let me pause here to draw some hard boundaries because this is important. I do not give legal or tax advice. I do not prepare or file tax returns or amended returns. I do not represent you before the IRS or communicate with the IRS on your behalf. That's the role of CPAs, EAs, or tax attorneys. If your case truly requires that level of professional representation, I will tell you straight up. No hesitation. I'm not here to keep you longer than I should. I'm here to give you the clarity and the support you need to handle what you can handle yourself, and to guide you toward other professionals when it's necessary. So why now? Why launch audit support at this moment? Because the IRS limbo chapter of my life is officially closed. I no longer have to hold back. I no longer have to tiptoe around what I can and can't say. And more importantly, I've seen firsthand how devastating it can be for regular people to face audits alone. This is about giving you options. It's about filling the gap between doing everything yourself and paying thousands for someone to do it all for you. It's about making audit support accessible, affordable, and understandable. When you know what that letter means, when your records are clean and organized, when you have someone beside you translating the jargon, you stop panicking, you stop avoiding, you start moving through the process calmly and confidently. That's the vision behind these services. Education plus action, clarity plus support. So when you hear Audit Support Services, I don't want you to picture another intimidating firm. I want you to picture a clear path, a plain English plan, Someone in your corner who knows the process, who's not afraid of the letters, and who believes you don't need to spend your life savings to get through it. So here's the bottom line. Zero Fluff Books started as an education-only platform because for a while that was all I was allowed to do. Now the path is clear, and I can finally expand into what this business was meant to be, a mix of teaching and hands-on support. That means the weekly education isn't going anywhere. You'll still get the plain English guides, the no-fluff episodes, and the resources that keep you in control of your numbers. But now you also have the option if you're ready for more. If your books are behind or messy, Bookkeeping Cleanup can give you a fresh start. And if you want, I can keep things updated month after month. If you've received an IRS notice or are facing an exam, Audit Support can help you decode what the IRS is asking for, organize your records into an IRS-ready package, and give you steady backup in the room so you're not answering questions about your books alone. If you're in DIY mode, stick with the podcast and the free resources. If you're ready for services, head over to zerofluffbooks.com to see the details on bookkeeping cleanup, notice review, audit document prep, and meeting support. And here's the important disclaimer. Zero Fluff Books provides bookkeeping and audit support education. I am not a CPA or an enrolled agent. I do not give legal or tax advice, and I do not represent clients before the IRS. My role is to help you keep your books clean, understand IRS requests, and prepare your records so you can respond with confidence. Thank you for listening, for showing up each week, and for putting in the work to get your books right. Clean books reduce stress. Clean books return your time. Clean books tell you the truth. And remember, clean books, less stress, zero fluff.